2024's MaXXXine is the latest gory installment in Ty West's slasher horror franchise. The character MaXXXine first made her debut in 2022's X, in which her lust for stardom resulted in her entanglement with a murderous couple on a farm. While X paid homage to 1970s slasher films such as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, its prequel Pearl was The Wizard of Oz meets a fantasy horror fever dream. Keeping with the theme of alluding to and emulating horror subgenres and classic Hollywood films, MaXXXine references the cheesy, often comedic, horror sequels of the 1980s. Hi, and welcome to Studio Cinema Saturday, the show where we review films old and new, the ones that you don't like and the ones that you do. I'm your host, Dalton Sherrill, and today I'm joined by Kael McCall. And today we're going to be reviewing 2024's MaXXXine, directed by Ty West.
The cast follows Mia Goth as Maxine Minx, Kevin Bacon as John Labatt, Simon Prast as Ernest Miller, Elizabeth Debicki as Elizabeth Bender, Giancarlo Esposito as Teddy Knight, Michelle Monaghan as Detective Williams, Bobby Cannavale as Detective Torres, Moses Sumney as Leon, and Halsey as Tabby Martin. We're going to start out with some of that spoiler-free talk and just kind of talk about how we generally liked the movie. The first thing I have written down for us to do is stack it up against its predecessors. How does this compare to X and Pearl?
I did really enjoy MaXXXine. It was entertaining. It was a great film. Now, compared to the last two, I've given it some thought, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if it tops X. Maybe it tops Pearl.
One of my first thoughts is the cinematography and the editing. Ty West's vision that he's thrown on this film in terms of the look and sound is amazing. It probably is my favorite of the three, just because I feel like it is the style of X in terms of cinematography, and they've just improved on that. In terms of story, I think I still prefer X, and then I have MaXXXine and Pearl on about the same level. Maybe I had more of an engaging watch with Pearl though, just because she's crazy and you never know what she's gonna do. I did really enjoy MaXXXine. This isn't necessarily the franchise falling off, it just maybe isn't the strongest installment.
And what I'll also say, I'll go on the record and say this. I think maybe X is the stronger film per se, but maybe I enjoyed MaXXXine more. I think there are films that I can respect from like a filmmaking standpoint and say that it just maybe is a little bit stronger of a film, but this one I personally enjoyed more.
I'm really close to that as well. I really enjoyed these three films on about the same level. This is a really great trilogy to come out in the 2020s. Some other things I just want to throw into the spoiler-free conversation really quick is, once again, Mia Goth is incredible, and she's been helping write these films as well, and so they're truly writing this for her, and they're just lining them up and knocking them down here. She's amazing.
MaXXXine might be a star, but Mia Goth is the true star here, just with her performances in all three of these films, and especially this one.
So one of the things that maybe hinders my viewing of this film is it lacks tension. It throws the pace off just a little bit of a slower film at times, just because your tense moments aren't really that tense.
Do you think this is something you get from a strong female protagonist per se, that is just so ruthless, and she kind of like maybe gains the upper hand in some of the scenes that she's in?
There's a moment where she does kind of get pinned down and pulls the piece out and puts the old boy in his place, and you're like, oh, she can take care of herself.
I mean, just think of the end of X.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's the only one who comes off that farm.
And then the last thing I'll add to the spoiler-free conversation is that I did see where the plot was going, and that maybe it ended up being a little bit predictable. Maybe they were trying to go that way to enhance the satire that they're trying to kind of talk about in terms of horror movie sequels of the 80s. And there are a lot of great film references in this film, I think of like Exorcist 2, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, these sequels that are kind of infamous. And this film's definitely trying to make a statement about that. They are making a sequel to a horror film in the actual film. Also, I see a lot of references to like Scream and They even go to the Bates Motel from Psycho, so that's really cool. And I'm sure there are other Easter eggs littered through this film. Those are just some of the ones I wrote down.
And we're in 1980s Los Angeles too, so people are dressed up like movie characters on the street. So you just have, this movie is chock full of references.
Spoiler warning ahead. If you haven't seen MaXXXine and crossed this threshold, it's your own fault. So this is kind of your 80s whodidit slasher kind of film, and it's kind of, I thought it was interesting how they combined the whodidit and the slasher. You have mystery, but you have classic horror. Maybe I feel like the film is trying to juggle a little too much at times with all of these aspects, plus being the sequel to X and continuing MaXXXine's story. And then we talked about the plot being predictable, so I'm just gonna rip the band-aid off. Who else could the villain have been but her dad at the end?
Everybody else is dead. Who else knows about what went down on the farm? Unless it was just some third party, and then it's like,
Once you get into that third act, you're just kind of like, okay, well, that happened. It's just kind of how I felt. Like it passed by, and I was like, okay. Now the ending presents some fun ideas that we'll get to later. Just the third act with her dad and some of the chase scenes being lacking a whole lot of tension at the end. I was having a great time watching the film, and then I just had to kind of slam the brakes and start thinking about the movie a little bit in the third act.
right, it's like I'm taking it serious the entire time, and maybe I'm expecting something a little bit more serious, tonally like X.
Yeah.
But then, if you're thinking that, if that's what you go in with, we kind of immediately leaving the theater, maybe we were a little underwhelmed, disappointed.
We were.
It
absolutely.
took me really thinking about maybe what they're trying to accomplish here with this movie, and think along the lines of a cheesy sequel a little bit more.
When you start thinking about that and you're reminded of, oh, they were making a cheesy sequel during the making of this movie, like it's definitely trying to be that.
I think of the line from the actress who was the lead star of the first Puritan movie. She has that line about, yeah, I was actually burned to a crisp at the end of the first movie, but here I am. And it just kind of feels like they make some of those decisions with the writing of this movie. And if that's what they're going for, then I'm all for it. Because we're talking about what is the legitimacy of this old man, presumed maybe in like his 60s, going around murdering people. And I think of the third act where the detective gets the cross in her eye, and maybe how the cult sort of reacts whenever the detectives show up. It kind of feels a little silly.
When you look at MaXXXine through the perspective of, oh, this is trying to be a cheesy 80s horror sequel, it made me like the film a whole lot more, because when I first walked out of the theater, I was like, these are the writing decisions they made? And then you think about it through that lens, and you're like, oh no, these were the only writing decisions to make.
I believe Psycho is another one of those films that has a bad sequel. And so making it a focal point of one of the scenes, returning to the Bates Motel and, the Bates house, maybe there's something that they're saying about it there, just another reference to these cheesy horror sequels.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is an aspect of the film I ended up loving, but I'm also an aspiring filmmaker. For the average viewer who's maybe not diving into 80s horror films on the daily basis,
It's a poorly written plot.
Oh, it does feel more like a poorly written plot, and that's kind of funny that they just want to bring back this cheesy sequel from the 80s in 2024.
I'll say, I think it's just maybe one of those things where they thought this is just the necessary next step. If we're going to emulate the slashers of the 70s...
It's the emulation of the time periods that they're doing.
We have a time jump. Now we're in the 80s, and these were the horror movies that were coming out. So if it's going to emulate the time and be a period piece, I think it's maybe a stronger film for doing that and leaning into the horror sequel aspect.
To say that MaXXXine's not a strong film, that's not what we're saying at all here by, kind of just picking at some things. We both really do love the film.
To say it's not a strong film is undermining the rest of the movie. That the performances, the cinematography, the editing, the production design.
There is good writing in the film as well. Like, that's maybe not leaning into the cheese as much. Like, just some genuine good writing. One of my favorite moments in the film is this moment where she is talking to the star from the first Puritan film in that same conversation you brought up, but her past two friends that have been killed by this serial killer told her that they were going to this party, and then the Puritan star tells her she's going to the party, and that sends MaXXXine into, I'm gonna go save this girl. Like,
I did like that aspect. It was kind of a cool bit for her character arc.
It was cool, but the way they shot it, and the way they kind of cut back to the first two girls telling her, was like, that is one of the tense moments of the film that did grab me. And that's probably my favorite moment because of that.
I think some other notable moments, and we talk about this film lacking tension, but one of the scenes that kind of got me ramped up for, what was to come is the scene where she's working in the red light district and she's just a dancer and the curtain lifts up and, she starts doing her thing and we don't know who the Night Stalker is, and
we can only imagine that's him.
You see that gloved, leather hand just kind of, he pulls the wooden plank off of the other side of the room, and I'm like, oh, that was kind of unsettling,
Yeah, and another moment that I'll kind of note that did bring the tension as well is when the Night Stalker kills Leon, her friend.
Yes.
And you do have this like scream-like kind of stabbing, psycho looking.
Yeah. And I mean, they do it in the first film with Pearl murdering the boyfriend in front of the van. It's very much that repetitive stabbing motion. You said you kind of knew where the film was going as far as the killer, but one thing that kind of, I guess, got me off of his scent was the fact that all of the victims were being found with the symbol of the devil.
See, that moment for me told me it was the dad, because he does have this religious background, and it was also the two girls working at the red light district with her. They got branded with that too. Right. So he was marking people kind of working in sex, and I don't know. I kind of felt like he was giving people the mark of the devil who he thought deserved the mark of the devil.
True.
And that kind of put me on his scent.
I think to get into MaXXXine's character arc, we really have to talk about where she ends up at the end of the film, or where you think she ends up.
She left the last film, and she had not become a star yet, but that was her dream from the beginning. So we get into this film, and she's made it in the porn industry, in the adult film industry, and now she's trying to break into Hollywood. You ask yourself at the end of the film, do we get there?
I honestly don't think so. I think you convinced me otherwise. I think we're living inside of MaXXXine's head, especially once we get into the credits sequence and we see the Hollywood sign being replaced with MaXXXine, and we cut back into her confrontation with her father and the shotgun, and I don't think it ended well for old girl.
Yeah, the fact that when she has the shotgun pointed at her dad, they're telling her, put the gun down, you're surrounded, get on the ground, and then we are cutting to her as a star, she's doing more coke and she's in another movie.
She's got the Alfred Hitchcock blonde look.
She's this classic Alfred Hitchcock blonde, this dream life she's always wanted. I even think that maybe there's symbolism there, because when we pick up in MaXXXine, she's gone blonde. She's trying to make it in Hollywood as a blonde. And so when we see her dream at the end, she's this Hitchcock blonde after, they had been taken to Bates Motel, and she's seeing, oh, if I work extremely hard, I'll be this. And then we cut back to her holding the shotgun and blowing her dad's head off. And I'm like, man, is that showing us that she didn't go with that life she had just dreamed up? And the very last shot of the film is them showing her the head mold that they had done to her in the making of the film. And we're just sitting with her head sticking out of a bed. And I have been thinking ever since I watched the film of what to make of that shot.
She's lost her head. I think it's almost a prophecy that X kind of sends forward of there's this connection between Pearl and MaXXXine. Obviously, Mia Goth plays both of them, but Pearl never became a star. MaXXXine moves to the big city, dyes her hair blonde, and that's kind of another connection to Pearl too, is that the blonde girl gets the part whenever Pearl auditions, for the dancing troupe. And I'm also thinking, I think Pearl was also living in her head in that moment, and that's just another parallel between the two characters, that they really weren't that different after all.
The Pearl visions were creepy.
They were. But it's like, that's kind of what MaXXXine's living at the end of the film, because she probably gets put away after blowing her dad's head off.
Yeah, I think there are two totally different ways to interpret the ending. Did she get her life? Or did she go to prison after killing her dad? I'm going to take a segment here, quick segment. My boy Ham, sitting over here on the couch. He's seen the movie. How did you think the film ended?
I didn't put that much thought into it, honestly.
Ham thought MaXXXine became a star. So, man, that's what I thought walking out of the theater as well, is that MaXXXine became a star, and that oh my God, we saw her whole progression. She went from nothing, then she became a porn star, then she became a star, and she has this cookie cutter amazing plot progression. She did have to do terrible things to get there, but she said the whole time she was willing to do whatever it took. So, did she do whatever it took? Whatever it needed? Whatever her dream needed? Or did she give it all away by pulling the trigger? I think the film poses a great question.
And it feels like it could go either way too, because he kidnapped her, and
Exactly.
they were about to, they were doing some sort of phony exorcism on her, and he was making his film exposing Hollywood and its satanic, connections and whatnot, but I felt like it could go either way.
Yeah, but what kind of threw me off is in the next scene, the news is calling her a hero and saying that she took down this killer, and I'm like, man.
It's like your Taxi Driver ending in a way. It's like, okay, is Travis Bickle gonna be painted up as this hero after what he's done? Is MaXXXine gonna be painted up as this hero? Or is she living in her head?
I love the film proposing that question at the end.
Absolutely. One particular shot, this is whenever I believe at Sunset Boulevard, where all the Hollywood stars are. There was one star that they stop on. This actress's name, she was an American silent film and stage actress, Theda Bara. Don't really know much about her. It's saying here that she was one of cinema's early sex symbols, and I think that's what the crocodile is named after, an X and Pearl.
Theda.
They cut to her star in the film, and so I think it's a little reference of what they named the crocodile after.
That's really cool.
One thing that I don't think they capitalized on enough, if they were going to introduce it, is including MaXXXine kind of having this sort of trauma response from X and visualizing Pearl in her day-to-day life. It's something that they never really followed to its conclusion.
True. They could have gave us a little bit more elaboration on that.
It's a thread that we kind of start and then we never really get anywhere with, but it was cool for the reference in Psycho. There's a silhouette up in the window of the manor, and whenever she sees Pearl there, it's a little reference to that, and that's fun. But I can think of two other scenes that did kind of, instill a little bit of nervousness in me. Whenever the tape shows up at her door, whenever her and Leon are watching movies and she sees the sex tape that she made in the first film. There was also the moment where the special effects artist was creating the mold for her head, and she's just kind of very much in her head at that moment and thinking someone's going to sneak up on her, and that's a scary scene, because I'm imagining myself there, just my head fully encased in this plaster, not being able to see what's around me, and people have been following me, stalking me, trying to get me. We haven't talked as much about the side characters in this film. What do you think about them?
Truly, I think it's because they are cool. Like Kevin Bacon and Giancarlo, his character, they are cool. They just don't have a huge significance to the plot.
No.
The acting is really great from both of them, and both of them do have strong characters. Kevin Bacon's character is goofy. The scene where they crush him is kind of funny.
It is.
It's out of place, kind of. It feels like a dang scene from Breaking Bad or The Sopranos, where they're just taking some dude out to kill him,
And it's like, I think that's kind of what some of these horror movies were trying to do. It's like they had some cheese, like in that moment, you know, where he gets crushed by the car compactor and this just massive pool of blood comes out. You have this tension and this nervousness, these horror moments mixed in with this comedy, and that's kind of what they were doing in the 80s.
Yeah, I am glad that you brought the side characters up. But I think all we have left to do now is to score the film.
I gave X a 7.5 out of 10. I'm going to give this film a solid 7 out of 10. It is a really solid film in all of the technical elements. It's got great performances. There were instances where I didn't know where the plot was going, and it kept me on my toes. And I think just being a cinephile and being someone who appreciates this classic cinema and the ambiguousness of the ending, I thought it was really good. It entertained me, it captivated me, and I'm going to be thinking about it long after this viewing.
Truly, I'm like a 7 for the watch, the film. It has great technical aspects, and I really want to give it a higher score. And the character arc of MaXXXine and what they do at the end that was really creative, I want to give like a 7.5 or even an 8 for. So like entertainment value, I want to go higher than that. So I think I'm going to go for like a 7.25 because I gave X a 7.5 and I don't want to like give it a higher score than X. 7.25 is my score for the film. We hope you enjoyed our review of 2024's MaXXXine, directed by Ty West. We really enjoyed this trilogy. I think it's one of the better trilogies to come out. No hate, but we just watched Quiet Place. Seen that trilogy now. I'm taking X trilogy over that. To stir up something in the comments, if you've made it this far in the video, let me know if you like the X trilogy or the Quiet Place trilogy more. And stay tuned for more Studio 24. We have a huge event that we're going to be doing online here on the channel that we want everyone to tune in to. It's our Studio 24 Horror Month. We're going to be releasing 4 horror short films of our own. We are filmmakers. That's what we're really trying to do here. We have a couple horror shorts for you to watch before Horror Month. We have They Took Her, Don't Press Record. Go watch those to get yourself ready for the event. We have plenty of other episodes of Studio Cinema Saturday here on the channel for you. We've done Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Civil War, Roadhouse. We've done X. We have TV Tuesday where you can catch up on all of your TV news. So what are you still doing on this video? Go check out the next one. I don't think do we need to do another outro?
No, we don't have to.
Cool.
We done?
Yeah.
Cool.